Good evening and welcome to Together in Faith. This is Pastor Lane Nelson at Eastside Lutheran Church in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, coming to you on this fine Tuesday evening. I pray that God is meeting you wherever you find yourself tonight, or if you are watching this at some time in the future, that your day has been filled with the presence of God. We are having our weekly Together in Faith show that we do here through the church, where we look at the faith of others that we might grow in our own. Now, for those of you who are regular participants here, you might notice that our camera angle tonight is a little bit different than normal. That's not because I want you to have such an up-close look at my face. We just had a little technical difficulty connecting some cameras. So you are going to be a little more up close and personal than you are sometimes. So if you need to, you can always just look away. But I hope you are having a great night wherever you are at. If you are out there, please say hello in the chat. Let us know that you are here. If you have questions or comments, or if things just strike you while we are talking, please add those as well. It certainly adds to the conversation that we have as this community here that we have formed with one another. As we are gathering tonight, I have a couple of things I just want to do in follow up. When we had this format a couple of weeks ago, our broadcast got cut off kind of midstream, and we had to have the show interrupted, if you will. We then did a little follow-up recap after that, but you missed some of the slides of the hiking trip that we were doing. So I want to start tonight by just taking a minute out of your day and show you some of those photographs that were kind of culminating this backpacking trip that I was on with high school students out at Camp Christicon in Montana a couple of weeks ago. For those of you who remember that episode, we were talking about how we were hiking high up in the mountains, and we were experiencing tragedy, or not tragedy, but difficulty, but through difficulty comes growth. Well, after we hiked, we finally got to this mountain lake. That is Megan. She was one of our high school students here. Her grandmother is a member of the congregation, and she was kind of on this trip with us, her and her father. So we got all the way up to this lake, but then that was not the top. We had to keep going from there to get to the pinnacle, to get to the peak, which you can kind of see a little bit behind her. But that was just such a nice shot of Megan and such a beautiful lake up there in the snow that was still there, even though we were there in mid to late July. I just had to share that. But when our group of backpackers finally made it to the top, they were all thrilled. And we were able to celebrate a worship service of Holy Communion at 10,700 feet elevation with one another. Right behind this circle is a big drop off that goes way down to that lake that you saw in the last picture. But the emotion and the exhilaration of these young people and their college age counselors, you can just see in their faces as they were doing this together, accomplishing this with one another, surprising themselves at what they could do, even in the face of difficulty. And then to be able to celebrate Holy Communion in the midst of that was just even more powerful, as we recognized our place in God's creation, and that even in the midst of all this wonder, God still creates, knows, and loves us. This is my daughter Olivia up on that peak, looking out into the distance. You might notice her hand holding her cell phone. As I mentioned in church that following week, that's the only time in a week stretch where we were able to get cell phone reception, is when we were up that high. So everybody then, of course, had to call their loved ones and share their exhilaration with them. One final photograph from that trip, and that is me up on that same peak, that same elevation, saying that we did it, but then also just looking out at the wonder of creation, the vastness of this planet that we have been blessed to steward and inherit, the ways in which God calls us to care for this wonderful place that we call home. So that is just the photograph recap for those of you who got cut off midstream a couple of weeks ago. I just like those photographs, just the power of that group when they made it to the top, and the impact that that will then have on their faith life for years and years to come is very, very gratifying. And then, of course, just the beauty of this place and the beauty of these young people who were a part of that experience. All right, back to my close-up with you. Thank you for bearing with me as we showed those photos. You can see from the little overlay drop that comes in, this is Together in Faith, and we have tonight a firm foundation is what we are talking about. We will be talking about that all through the fall, through the month of August, September, October, November, as it is our fall stewardship theme. As together we talk about the ways in which we are called to be stewards, not only of creation like we see here in these photos, but then also creation in our daily lives, creation with our resources, our finances, our time, our talents, all of those pieces. And how do we put that together so that it becomes a life-forming kind of entity for us? So that is what we are talking about as we think of stewardship. And here in this place at Eastside, where I serve, we are finding ourselves on a firm foundation. Having gone through some difficulties, we have been surprised at the resiliency of this congregation, the leadership that has stepped forward, and that God is still doing very, very wonderful, powerful things here through this congregation. And I could not be more thankful and grateful for the myriad of volunteers that we have here. You might notice I am still in black today with my tab in my shirt. We had a funeral here today, and so our thoughts and prayers go out to that family still as they're grieving. But in those moments, an example of the stewardship of time and talents we see at our members is those volunteers who step forward to help serve, to care for families when they are in need. Those volunteers who come to serve funeral luncheons and to work the service for these families is great stewardship that we can provide to one another as a Christian community. And I see in that a very firm foundation of who we are called to be for one another here in this place, to celebrate with people like on these mountaintop kinds of experiences like this, but then also to grieve and to support one another when we put on sackcloth and ashes, if you will, to be there for each other. But before we dive again too deeply into that, I want to take us on one more bit of a tangent, and that is to do some Bible trivia. Now, why Bible trivia, you ask? Why Bible trivia? Well, just simply coincidental. As I was walking past my shelf this afternoon, I came across one of my Bible trivia books, and I thought, this looks interesting. And so I just kind of dove in for a minute or two, and I thought, it might be kind of fun to do that with you all here tonight on Together in Faith. So I am going to go across the room and grab my trivia book that I must have left on the other side. So please be patient. Talk amongst yourselves. I am back. Sorry that I didn't have any elevator music for you while we were in our little bit of hiatus there. All right, Bible trivia. I am going to be asking these questions out of this book, The Complete Book of Bible Trivia, copyright 1988. So it is not exactly a fresh resource. 1988 was more than a year or two ago, but the content in it has not changed since then, so we will have a chance to look at that. 1 minute here. I then forgot my reading glasses. I'm of that age now where I really need reading glasses if I'm going to be doing things out of a book like Bible trivia. One more time, talk amongst yourselves. And we're back. All right. Oh, and since we are back, I see that Alice has tuned in. Good evening to Alice. I am thrilled that you are here. Thank you for joining in this conversation. Oh, and we see that Gail is here. Also, good evening, Gail. So happy to have you here. Your name on the screen always makes me smile. All right, as promised, some Bible trivia. Now, the topic we are going to be looking at this evening is everyday phrases. Everyday phrases. So I am going to give you an everyday phrase, and then I invite you to think of where is that found in the Bible, or what's the context that gives us that particular phrase, okay? So the first one we have come up is the skin of my teeth. This was surprising to me, okay? Where do we find that in the Bible? In the book of Job, chapter 19, it says, I escaped with the skin of my teeth. So there we go. That common everyday phrase comes to us from the book of Job. All right, the next one, a little bit easier perhaps for some of you. Salt of the earth. Again, a very common phrase. Ye are the salt of the earth, Matthew chapter 5. Yes, that is in Matthew's Sermon on the Mount. It is in Luke's Sermon on the Plain as well. The next one, holier than thou. Some of us might have felt that way at times to time. Woe is me for feeling that way. But holier than thou, where does that come from? Isaiah chapter 65, where it states, I am holier than thou. It doesn't give us the context, but it shows us where that is at. Woe is me. Some of you may have found yourself saying that, but where in the world is that in the Bible? Again, we go to Isaiah, this time chapter 6, verse 5, where he states, Woe is me, for I am undone. The prophet is lamenting. All right, I'm going to break trivia because I see that Connie Jackson has joined in, and I want to give a quick shout out to her. I hope you are doing well and that life is good in Texas. Thank you for chiming in. God's peace to you this night, Connie. All right, back to more Bible trivia. Everyday phrases, where can they be found? Can a leopard change his spots? Yes, that does come to us from the Bible. And it comes from Jeremiah 13. Can the Ethiopian change his skin, or the leopard change his spots? A drop in the bucket. That too, a biblical phrase from Isaiah 40. Behold, the nations are as a drop in a bucket, and are counted as the small dust of the balance. So, speaking to the minuteness of us as a people. The next one, eat, drink, and be merry. This one I'm going to guess that many of you might know. That common phrase comes to us, of course, from Ecclesiastes. A man hath no better thing under the sun than to eat, to drink, and to be merry. Here is one that I heard when I was a kid growing up. Pride goeth before the fall. I certainly got the point of that when I was young, but I don't know if I knew where it came from. That comes to us from the book of Proverbs, Proverbs 16, verse 18. Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before the fall. So never think too much of yourself was a message I heard quite a bit when I was growing up. My brother's keeper. Again, this is one that I'm going to guess that many of you are aware. My brother's keeper. Where do we find that in Scripture? It is, of course, early on, Genesis chapter 4, verse 9. Am I my brother's keeper? One of the brothers says of the other after he has gotten him in some trouble and God comes a-calling, and he diverts the attention saying, what, am I my brother's keeper? And then the last one I threw up, the blind leading the blind. Many of you probably have a good idea as to where that comes. We find that again also in the book of Matthew, this time chapter 15, verse 14. And if the blind lead the blind, both shall fall in the ditch. So those are just a few of the everyday common phrases that have their origins here in the Bible. And so fun to just kind of look at those again, all of this coming from the 1988 copyright, The Complete Book of Bible Trivia. Just a little fun. Wonder if we can find just a random one. Oh, is there anything that would be just interesting? They have them all geared up on topics. So what do we see? Some amazing animals. Well, that sounds fun, doesn't it? All right. Here is one you might know. What did Peter find with a coin in its mouth? Testing your New Testament knowledge, and that, of course, was a fish. A fish with a coin in its mouth that could be used to pay the tax. So there we go. A little fun with Bible trivia. Back to our theme for tonight, stewardship, a firm foundation, as we are looking at this topic. Now, many places, many congregations have their stewardship campaigns running late in the fall. This year, we're having our emphasis a little bit earlier here at Eastside. We're going to be looking at 4 cornerstones that make up our stewardship theme of a firm foundation. But even if you're not a part of this congregation, I think these questions and these ideas can be significant for you wherever you might find yourself. And so, first off, we have to ask that question, what does stewardship mean to you? I think most of us have a pretty good understanding of what stewardship is if you spend any time in church. You know, it's not just about people giving their money so that we can meet pledges and budgets, though that is certainly a significant part of it and certainly an important part of it. Without margin, there is no mission, is a phrase that I've heard from Mr. David Brunkow over and over, and there is great truth in that. But stewardship is also more than that. And so I'm curious as to what it might mean for you. And if you have a thought on stewardship, please, again, feel free just to type that in and share that with everybody as we are watching. Because I'm guessing many people have similar ideas, but it might come to light a little bit differently for you. Maybe another way of thinking of this is, what did stewardship mean in the home that you grew up in? Did you grow up in a home where stewardship was talked about, where giving of yourself in some way was an expectation? What did that look like? What did your parents pass on to you with this idea of stewardship? Stewardship, if we are to just look at a definition, is a job of supervising or taking care of something, such as an organization or property. That certainly is a good kind of general understanding of that, how we care for something. I have thought of stewardship myself as caring for something that belongs to someone else. And part of that is true, but you can also be a steward of your own things. But then ultimately you have to ask, are these things really my own? Does anything that I really have really belong to me? And I think there is certainly a faithful way of looking at that, saying, well, no, nothing that we have really belongs to us. We are simply caretakers of these gifts that we have, things that have been entrusted to us, from the clothes on our backs to the money in our accounts, even to the talents that we employ, the things that we're good at, how we use our time. All of these are gifts to us. Going back to the black that I am still wearing and the tab still in my pocket from the funeral this afternoon, even the gift of life itself is something that we have been entrusted with to use for the benefit of others, to use to the glory of God. And so often we find ourselves slipping into ways of protecting and hoarding so that we might have. But one of the cool things about faith is we find that when we give, we receive more, which we'll get to in a little bit more with a parable we'll read here in just a little bit. But as we do, ask yourself this question. Sit with this for a little bit tonight. What do you steward? If you were to reflect upon your life, what is it that you steward? And how good of a job are you doing at stewarding that which you are called to care for? Now, you might be doing a fabulous job, or you might think, well, I'm doing a terrible job. This is not a place to judge. This is not a place to invoke guilt or to give, pats on the back to everybody. It's a chance for us to just kind of reflect and think about what we are called to do and what we are, how we are doing in that job. What's been entrusted to you? How well do you steward it? To do this, we are going to look at this parable from Matthew 25, one in which I'm sure many of you are familiar. And of course, not only did I leave my Bible trivia book across the office, I left my Bible there, so I'm going to have to get up again. My apologies. Once again, please talk amongst yourselves. And we're back. All right. Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 to 30. For it is if a man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled the account with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I've made 5 more. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been entrusted with worthy of a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And then the one with the 2 talents also came forward, saying, Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. See, I've made 2 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Then the one who had received the 1 talent came forward, saying, Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow, gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid, and I went and I hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours. But his master replied, You wicked and lazy slave, you knew, did you, that I reap where I did not sow and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one with 10 talents. For to those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. For this worthless slave, throw him out into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Well, it gets quite dark there at the end, doesn't it? Yeah, it's kind of harsh. But the idea is the same, right? What will we do with what's entrusted to us? Will we steward in a way that it becomes a blessing? Or will we hoard it and hide it so that it really doesn't have a benefit for anyone else, maybe just ourselves? And that's difficult, right? That can be very difficult to trust enough to use what we have with the idea that we will certainly get more in the process. Now, I'm not trying to go into kind of a theology of glory and abundance here, but more of a theology of trust. Are we able to live in such a way when we can trust our time and our talents and our money and our resources and ourselves to use them for the benefit of others in Jesus' name, trusting that God's got us, that God's got us and will allow us to do that? This theme that we are going to be talking about here at Eastside, we're going to focus it over the course of 4 months on 4 cornerstones of how we use our own resources here as a church, looking at inreach, or what we do together with one another, looking at education, how do we grow in our discipleship, at worship, how do we focus our lives looking and living toward God, and then outreach, of course, how do we use what we have for our neighbors? Here in this place, we have that phrase, in the neighborhood for good. We ask ourselves over the course of this fall, in August, how are we being church together? And already this summer and this fall, we have seen some powerful ways in which we are being church together, where we are finding that firm foundation. Our church picnic that we had was just wonderful. The turnout was well more than I thought. But then also other events that we're doing together. We have our church sing-along coming up here on the 17th of August. And pretty soon we'll be having our big rummage sale that we do annually here as a congregation. And then our block party for our neighborhood. These are all things that we're doing together, lifting one another up. Things that we can steward for other people. Even as mentioned, how we care for one another around joy and tragedy as we come together as a congregation to be there for one another. That all builds that foundation. Those people who were in the kitchen here this afternoon serving that funeral, the ways in which they were building one another up and forming that firm foundation. We will look at education in September. Of course, that's when things kind of get fired up with our fall programming, and Sunday school starts and confirmation starts, our adult classes and our choir. How are we learning together? How are we growing as disciples? We will look here in October about worship. Worship is a wonderful emphasis in October because we celebrate not only Reformation, but we also have confirmation of our young people, our ninth graders, when they come forth and read their faith statements, and as they then say yes to the promises given to them in baptism, that they might live a life in worship of God. And then finally in August, we will be looking at outreach. Again, a great time to do that when we have the season of Thanksgiving. It's also when, of course, when we will be putting budgets together for the next year. And so it's important to think, how will we use our resources, or what resources do we need to acquire to do the mission that we're being called to do, to be not just the people together in our own things, in our education and worship, but how do we then get that out of the walls to the people who are around us, people who long to know this relationship with God, whether they realize it or not sometimes. We have a new finance committee here at church. You'll be hearing more about that soon, but I'm just putting that out as a teaser for our local people here. But they are people who are stewarding their own time to come together for the good of other people. And I'm excited for what they are going to do. I'm excited for the fact that they're volunteering. In fact, that's just something for all of you, no matter where you are, if you are in Texas or Louisiana or here in Sioux Falls. How is God calling you today to use your gifts for other people? Again, if you wanted to throw something in the chat that comes to mind, that's great. But if not, still think about that. How is God calling you tonight to steward what you have for the good of others? How will you support the mission of your own church through your giving? We are all called to use what we have for the good of others, but the ultimate purpose of that is not for the institutions. It's not even for the fellowship that we experience, but it's so that we might live into Christ's kingdom. All of those other things are wonderful side benefits that come from that. But at the heart of it, it's how are we being called to live Christ's kingdom today? And so I pray that you have a wonderful, challenging, exciting opportunity doing that in your own setting, wherever that might be, because we are all but stewards of God's gifts. Everything that we own, even your time tonight, wherever you might be, it's a gift. We aren't guaranteed anything, and so we trust it. Oh, Connie oversees the LWR quilting here at Kingsman. That is awesome. LWR does a wonderful job of helping people steward their resources for people who really, really need them. And that quilting ministry has a big impact. So that's fun. Thank you for sharing that, Connie. That's a great example, just a great example. I can't say enough good things about the work of LWR or our quilters in so many of our congregations. They just do powerful work. That is what we have tonight, and I have to get up one last time so that I can get Luther's Small Catechism, because when we updated our program for this tonight, I lost my screen that has Luther's evening prayer, and I would hate for us to go to bed on a Tuesday night not having heard Luther's evening prayer, right? So if you would, again, for the final time, talk amongst yourselves, and I'll be right back with Luther's Small Catechism. You would think we should have it memorized by now anyway, right? But here we go. Again, we should really have elevator music. If I was better at this, we would have something like that. All right. We close tonight, as we do, with Luther's evening prayer. I give thanks to you, Heavenly Father, through Christ Jesus, your dear Son, that you have graciously protected me today. I ask you to forgive me all my sins where I have done wrong, and graciously protect me tonight. Into your hands I commend myself, my body, my soul, and all that is mine. Let your holy angel be with me, so that the wicked foe may have no power over me. Amen. And may we go off to bed. May we have a wonderful evening. I want to say thank you to all of you for giving of your own time, stewarding your resources to have these regular weekly Together in Faith conversations with us here at Eastside Lutheran. I value your time. I value the input that you put on the screen. And I trust and pray for you guys that God might walk with you, that together we might all grow in faith daily and through these times